Welcome to the Redondo Beach local election candidate discussion for City Attorney. My name is Jeff Mailman of Mailman Inc. Public Relations, and I will be your moderator for this discussion. Congratulations on your decision to run for public office. We're speaking today with the incumbent City Attorney Mike Webb. Today's format will be as follows. You may begin with a 1-minute opening statement. The timekeeper will hold a yellow card when there are 15 seconds left on the clock. The timekeeper will hold a red card when time is up on the clock. You will have 30 minutes total to answer the 8 pre-selected questions, which were emailed to you and to each candidate at least 1 day prior to today's Zoom call. When there are 15 minutes left to speak, the timekeeper will advise of the time left on the clock. So if you're ready, let's start with your opening remarks.
Hello, my name is Mike Webb. I'm the city attorney, and I've had the honor of serving you first as city prosecutor and now as city attorney. I grew up in the South Bay. I've lived here over 50 years. I care deeply about the South Bay, and my wife Deanna and I are thrilled that we've had an opportunity to raise our 6 children here in Redondo Beach. I care about Redondo, and my priority has always been to protect public safety and improve the quality of life of Redondo and its residents. I'm proud that serious crime has been reduced by 63% under my leadership. I'm proud that the police officers and the firefighters who I work with daily to help them do their job have endorsed me. And I'm proud during this contentious time that the past 3 mayors, Bill Brand, Steve Aspel, and Mike Ginn, despite their differences on policy issues, have all endorsed me as the best person for the job.
Great, thank you. Would you please share your top 2 or 3 priorities for the city of Redondo Beach if you're elected city attorney, and what are your plans to accomplish them?
Well, number 1, of course, is public safety. And it's very important to maintain the quality of life in spite of all the changes at the county and state level. You have a situation where you have overcrowding in the jails, you have many changes in the law, and it's become even more challenging to achieve them. I've done a number of creative solutions to problems that the residents have let us know about. And this goes all the way back to doing the first gang injunction in the suburban area that was nationally recognized and drastically reduced violent crime and gang contacts. And it returned Perry Park, where it was done in North Redondo, to the residents, to the community, and dramatically increased property values in that area. The second issue that I think we'll need to address is, or I fear, is statewide leaders trying to take control from local voters over local issues. And we've already seen this happen. The reason that we're having an election in March when no one else is that I stood up to the state when they passed a law that said local voters didn't have control anymore over when their leaders were chosen. And the state attorney general came up with an opinion that said that law applies to every city, including cities like Redondo Beach. I advised the mayor and council that wasn't correct. It was a violation of the home rule provision of the state constitution. And we were the one city to stand up to the state and say, no, it's our voters that get to decide. And I argued it at the trial court. We were successful, and it was upheld on appeal. The reason that I fear that we'll need to be diligent is there are bills pending before the state legislature right now that would change the very character and nature of Redondo Beach. They would eliminate single-family zoning. And they have provisions in one bill that says it doesn't matter that there's something to the contrary that the voters have passed, like the voters passed our charter amendment in Article 27. And it's important to me that local voters contain control, but retain control over local issues. And because I've had the experience in standing up to them, I think I'll be very effective in continuing to do that. And I think our mayor and council, they disagree on many issues, but they're all united on that we need to keep a local control. The third issue, I think, is dealing with the ever-growing throughout the state of California, particularly in LA County, problem of mental illness and homelessness. And it is not something we can ignore and hope will just go away, or hope it won't, move in increasing numbers to Redondo. We need to be very proactive. And, we've already, I was directed by the mayor and city council, even though it's not a city attorney job, and nowhere else have I identified that the city attorney was tasked with it, in trying to come up with something that would address our problem. And we've done it for about 18 months. After the first year, we were recognized as an innovative program, deserving of a grant to totally fund it this second year from the 16 South Bay cities that make up the South Bay Cities Council of Government. And it's being studied and considered as a model program. And that's what will really address it. If each city does its part to deal with their persons experiencing homelessness. And the results thus far are very promising. Supervisor Hahn has recommended elements of it to cities throughout the county. I'm meeting with a neighboring city tomorrow morning, as of the date of this, the taping, where they can consider they're adopting their own homeless court. And we have the only outdoor homeless court in LA County, which is necessary, I think, during an age of COVID, to protect the court workers and protect our unhoused neighbors. And it provides them an opportunity to access needed services and become housing ready on a path to becoming permanently housed. And we've seen remarkable success in getting people off the streets and into permanent housing. And I think that's the end goal for everyone, for the community, for public safety, and for our unhoused neighbors, is to get the help they need when they need it to become permanently housed.
Great, thank you. With the shrinking amount of money available in the city's budget, how can the city attorney's office help reduce costs?
Well, I think there's the traditional method. There are 432 employees, not counting the mayor and council, the other elected officials, and we have to advise all of them and get the meat and potatoes of the city done. So we try and do the vast majority of that in-house because it's just cheaper. So the vast majority of contract negotiations, resolutions, everything else, advice to the council, we do that with myself and the three attorneys I have on the civil side. But we've done some really creative things to address that. And the first one is actually not reducing costs, but effectively reducing the net cost. We were able to contract my office out. So a little over 6 years ago, Hermosa Beach decided to change their city prosecutor, and they put out a request for proposal. I went to the city council and mayor and recommended that they allow me to apply for it. And so I looked at it. I looked at the situation. We had our prosecutors in one courtroom sharing it with the DA's office. So they weren't, it wasn't efficient half the time. Hermosa had their prosecutor in a different courtroom with the DA's office. So I asked the presiding judge at Torrance Superior Court, if we get this, can we combine the Hermosa cases into our into our courtroom so that it's all effective, efficient time. And there were some logistical hurdles, but we overcame them. So I put in for the position, and I was selected and have continued to serve as Hermosa City prosecutors for more than 6 years. Hermosa pays the city of Redondo Beach $200,000. I get none of it. There's no additional compensation. This is just effectively a way of sharing the cost of having a city attorney with another city attorney just by being more efficient and effective. And it has benefits. Criminals don't really know often city boundaries. And so the criminals that we're prosecuting are often prosecuted in neighboring cities. And so it became something that saves us a tremendous amount of money in terms of net cost, and also um, makes us more effective. The second thing that we've done that's creative is come up with ways to fund city costs with alternative methods. So for example, during the budget crunch of 2008 and different times, you don't want to cut necessary police services. And so I came up with, in conjunction with Chief Police Kaufman and retired Redondo Captain John Skipper, I helped create the Redondo Beach Police Foundation. And the Police Foundation raises money to be able to provide for things that a tight city budget can't. And so we don't just have the usual supplies and training and equipment for our police department. We have the best. And we also, they also fund efforts for the police to engage in more community engagement so that they can live up to the model that, they're the police leading the way, they're the community leading the way in law enforcement. And so I'd done that previously after the tragic events of 9/11. And I created a foundation with retired Captain John Skipper and retired Police Sergeant Phil Keenan to provide equipment that we just didn't have. Police officers didn't have all the PPE that they would need during a time of terrorism. There were no bomb dogs west of the Mississippi. And so I created a foundation and raised funds. We bought the FBI, the first bomb dog west of the Mississippi, and entered an MOU that if there were a tie in terms of priority, they would assign it to the South Bay. So there are creative ways to maintain level of service without impacting city budget. And trying to find efficiencies in City Hall. So I proposed and worked with Public Works. We saw an increasing number of slip and fall complaints that often happens when the economy suffers. And so I pointed out to them we could save a lot of money in the long run by improving and speeding up our process of repaving and repairing potholes and defects in the sidewalk, and doing a better job of cataloging when we knew about the repairs and more speedily repairing the sidewalks. And so if anybody has ever walked around Redondo and then walked around San Pedro or any other city in LA, there's a big difference. And it's also saving us money in the long run.
Excellent. As an elected city attorney, do you believe that you work for the city, the city council, the residents, and why? And what accountability does the city attorney's office have to the residents of Redondo Beach?
That's a good question. The technical answer is we work for the city. I work for the city, I work for the corporation. Now it sounds simple, but that can have many different complications because there can be conflicts within it. If we advise a police officer on how to do their job, or then we're advising them as part of giving that they're an officer official of the city, any employee, that's true. If they get sued, if a public works truck backs into a resident's car, we're defending the city and the resident if and the employee if it's in the performance of their duty. If they do something wrong and their department head wants to discipline them, we're defending the city and the department head and human resources against the employee. Same thing goes with if the city manager wants to discipline or remove a department head, or if the council wants to remove the city manager. So you can see the conflicts. And if we represented the individual employee or official, there'd be conflicts continually. If I know that someone is doing something wrong, it's my duty to report it up to their supervisor. I couldn't do that if they were an individual client. We get questions all the time, and we can't represent or give legal advice to members of the public, even Redondo residents. Often they have conflicts with themselves. We have, mediation, we have conflict resolution programs in place, but the client is the city, and the accountability to the residents is absolute in terms of they get to choose who sits in this office every 4 years. If we're not doing the job as provided by them in the charter, then they get to make a change. So even though we don't report and can't report to them, even though our client is the city, we have absolute accountability. The one other thing I'd add is we do criminal prosecution as well. And in that case, we represent the people of the state of California.
Great. That's actually a nice segue into the next question, which is, as you know, few cities actually have a elected city attorney. What do you believe the advantages or disadvantages are for Redondo having an elected city attorney?
Well, I think, ultimately, it doesn't matter what I think or anyone else thinks, except for the Redondo voters. There have been attempts to change that in the past to being appointed by the city council. And Redondo voters have rejected that by fairly wide margins. And I think they want the advantages of that accountability. They get to choose the person, and they like the check and balance. If a council members are elected for policy reasons, they don't get to run. We have a council manager form of government that was passed as part of the good government stage, and the idea is not to let politics run good government, and not to let to have the best administrative person to run the government efficiently, and the council chooses that person in the city manager. Councils can, since their campaign and since their job is to pass certain policies, they just want to get those policies accomplished. And the problem is the city attorney has to make certain it's done legally, it doesn't infringe anyone else's rights, and it follows the proper process. That can be frustrating. And it's important to have an elected city attorney, because they can't replace me just because they disagree with me, or whoever city attorney is. We had a successful ruling earlier this week, and there were council people who wanted a certain outcome and wanted to do a certain way. Fortunately, the majority adopted the recommended part from the recommended path from our office, and it was held up. It was upheld by the court. If they had chosen the more the speedier path towards getting it done, that ultimately would have cost the city in terms of time and money. And so I think that check and balance, I'm big on the city complying with the open meeting law, the Brown Act. And I can point out, and we'll do so fairly assertively, when somebody is even inadvertently violating the open meeting law, and the freedom to do that and not have them hold hard feelings and try and replace the city attorney with someone who will give them an answer they want to hear protects the residents. The advantages of a non-elected would be you can recruit from a wider area of things. This job is very unique. You need to have both municipal law experience, which is the central mission of the city attorney, really knowing municipal law well, but also having prosecution experience. And that doesn't often coincide. And the other advantage is never ever having to go through a campaign season again would be a big advantage for having a non-elected city attorney. But I think the communities made a good choice in continuing to have the check and balance and have a city attorney who's accountable to them.
Excellent. What role do you believe the city attorney has in terms of policy making?
Well, essentially none. He or she shouldn't. The city attorney shouldn't have, other than this. So it's important for the city attorney not to realize the job that the city attorney was elected to, and it was not to direct policy. It was to help legally and efficiently and effectively implement the policies that a majority of the council wants to do, to help the department heads and the city manager do their job legally to protect the city in terms of prosecution and also in terms of defensive lawsuits. But we should be helping them. We should come up with creative ways for them to do it. But I wait to hear from a majority of the council. The majority of the council has given me varied tasks ranging from opposing the new power plant on the AES site to trying to address the growing problem of mental illness. And we're most effective when the council can find common ground and come up with clear direction that we can implement. And it's my job to try and do that in the most effective way possible.
Great. So what do you believe is the role of the city attorney and the city prosecutor in reducing crime in Redondo Beach?
It's essential. It's my number one priority, and it's growing in priority, not crime, but its importance is growing in priority. And that's because of changes at the state level. Many felony crimes are reduced to misdemeanors. The DA's office is the only one that can file straight felonies, such as murder or rape. The city attorney is the only one, when there is a city attorney who does state misdemeanors, that can file misdemeanors. There's a whole category in the middle called wobblers, and that can range from grand theft to domestic violence. And that's growing, and the number of crimes that are reclassified as misdemeanors are growing. So it's a more important role. At the same time, even before COVID, county jail is overcrowded. And so it's becoming very important to come up with creative programs to address and reduce crime. And we have a long track record. I have a long track record in my office of coming up with creative programs to combat gang crime, to combat auto theft, to address homeland security. I came up with a plan, and the state copied it. And the police officer standard and training had me go throughout the state lecturing sheriffs and police chiefs on how to implement our plans. And so you can't just do the normal stuff. It doesn't work, and it's growing in importance.
What do you think of the most critical lawsuits in which the city is currently involved, and why?
I think that one would be the Redondo Beach waterfront, because they're demanding upwards of $15 million. And that is money that wouldn't be covered by insurance. That was the ruling I was referring to, that we had a very positive ruling earlier this week. It's going well, but we need to make certain it continues to go well, because it not only could cost so much money, but it's getting in the way of responsibly redoing and improving our waterfront. The second case is we have a lawsuit which involves potentially millions of dollars regarding many years ago how the gun range was operated. And so there was we were turned down for insurance. My office spent a lot of hours finding past insurance and that would cover it, and they begrudgingly accepted the defense with a reservation of rights. And so that will be important to conclude effectively. And the third one would be the one, it's not a lawsuit yet, but the one I mentioned before. If the state tries further to have state politicians take away local control over voters on eliminating single family zoning or anything else, I think I would be hard pressed to imagine the council not give me direction to oppose it, just like we successfully opposed their attempt to take over how the voters choose their elected officials.
Great. Mr. Webb, thank you very much for taking the time to talk about the city attorney's office. We've reached our final question, which is there anything that we haven't mentioned that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, I would. I mentioned how much I dislike I love the job. I hate the campaign. And this is a very divisive time in our country, in our community. And we're becoming more and more divided. The attacks on social media and negative campaigning can be effective. And we're divided as a city on many policy issues. We have a 3-2 block that votes often on, it changes on some issues, but with the mayor in opposition. So we've seen many more vetoes, which is in his power on city issues than I ever remember. I'm very proud that I'm endorsed by all three of the past mayors, Mayor Bill Barron, former Mayor Steve Aspel, and Mike Ginn. They have, as anyone who's paid attention to the city politics knows, they've had serious disagreement on policy issues, but they're all endorsing me because they trust me to do the job the city attorney best, and that is to provide trustworthy, knowledgeable legal advice. And so I'm very proud of that. They know the work that I've done the best. They've all been in closed sessions, which the members of the public can only speculate about. I'm also proud during this difficult period for public safety that our police officers and our firefighters have endorsed me. And they trust me to help them do their job, which is to protect all of us. And I look forward to helping them do that for another 4 years.
Great. Mr. Webb, thank you again for taking the time to participate in this event. It was hosted by the Redondo Beach Chamber of Commerce. And thank you for agreeing to be recorded and make this video publicly available. Hopefully lots of folks will have the opportunity to see this and hear your position on the issues. And we wish you all the best with your campaign.
Thank you.
Thank you.